Hello, everyone. Hello, can you hear me? Hello. Good to see you all. I see there's still people online for vodka tonics, which is fantastic. Thanks everyone for coming. Great to see you all. Welcome to ICA. I am Andrew Oot. I'm the executive director. It's wonderful to have you here tonight, even though it is absolutely freezing cold. And you guys are huddled up next to the heater. I hope you're getting a little bit of warmth. It's wonderful to have you. And we are incredibly excited to be presenting the work of Minerva Cuevas. Wow. And for those who haven't seen the show, please, after the presentation of polar bears, no, I don't think that's the presentation. After the presentation, please head up to the top of the hill to see the exhibition. It is really fantastic. I do have a few comments here with a very long paper. I'll be short and quick here. But before we get it started, I would like to acknowledge the ICA San Diego sits on the ancestral homeland of the Kumeyaay Nation. The museum extends its respect and gratitude to the Kumeyaay peoples who have taken care of this land since time immemorial. I'd like to thank our board of directors, a number of which who are here. Hi, Gustavo. Good to see you. And to our amazing ICA team who's here, thank you all for all of your wonderful hard work in making all of this possible. And a very special thanks to our curatorial team, Husha Sanders and Roxana Lopez, for putting on the show. Thank you so much. As well as to Shente, Delilah, and Avia for helping to paint the mural that's also at the top of the hill. Our organization is also made possible by ongoing support from the cities of Encinitas, of San Diego, the County of San Diego, the California Arts Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as the support of the Linda Brandis Foundation, Bootgimbach Foundation, and the Somm Family Foundation, and a special thanks to our partners at First Republic Bank for their support of institutional programming, including making this whole evening possible tonight. As well as a special thanks to Kurimansuto, Minerva's Gallery in Mexico City, for also their instrumental support in making this exhibition possible tonight. I want to thank all of you, our ICA members, who make all of our exhibitions and education programs possible, reaching tens of thousands of people across the county each year. And if you are interested in becoming a member, if you're not a member, you can see Stephanie right there standing, waving her hand, and Stephanie would be pleased to help you get connected to our institution, help support all the programs that we're doing. And I think we already ran out of food because there's so many members here tonight. Thank you so much. But there's wonderful Topo Chico, who helps to sponsor all of our events, as well as Tito's Vodka and Lost Abbey. So thank you to all of those sponsors for making all of this possible. When Minerva's exhibition first started being installed, I would walk into the gallery and I would think, wow, those flowers look beautiful. The paintings are so beautiful and they're so idyllic. And it immediately hit me. That's the point. It's supposed to be beautiful. It's supposed to look beautiful. Her work is meant to entrance you. It's supposed to capture you. It's the beauty of the work that just warms your heart. But I'm sorry to say, you've all been duped. It is not about the beauty, it's about the destruction. It's about the power of design, it's about the power of necessity, the power of beauty, and the convenience that has influenced us so much that we forget what effect our actions have on the natural world. Exploring the link between communication and public action is foundational to Minerva Cuevas' artistic practice. Her research-based projects provide insight into the ecological spectrum, often adopting corporate and advertising imagery to comment on the consumption of natural resources, food production, labor practices, and colonialism. Her artworks generate ironic and contemplative images that make us reconsider our visual memories. Minerva lives and works in Mexico City. She is the founder of Mejor Vida Corp., the member of Irrational.org, and founder of the International Understanding Foundation. She has presented her work at the SF MoMA in San Francisco, Museo Jumex in Mexico City, Dodd Gallery in Berlin, Guggenheim Museum in New York, South London Gallery, Mocha Soul, Site Santa Fe, the list keeps going, MoMA PS1 in New York, Kunsthal Basel, Whitechapel and Gallery in London, Palais de Tokyo in Paris, amongst many, many others. And she is also represented by Kurimansuto in Mexico City. So please give a warm welcome to Minerva Cuevas.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm impressed with this weather. I was not expecting this Californian weather, but we'll go kind of fast, so we have time for questions. This computer needs to be logged in. Yep. Thank you. The you know. No, the presentation will be about polar bears, in fact, so it was ready. Well, I'll start by talking about this work that was developed as an intervention in Mexico City. It's called Dodgem. And one important thing to clarify is that my work is very much based on research, on strategies, interventionism. So that's why you see that in some cases I can present mural paintings, develop video work, produce cookies, currency, websites. It's all a strategy. So as part of this strategy, I've been using corporate images. In this case, I found this fun fair in the middle of two main avenues in Mexico City. And I only placed the logos of main corporations related to the oil industry. I didn't alter or change anything because the whole situation was playful already, but was also connected to how these companies crash with each other and also fight for territory. This intervention happened in 2002, so that means it's a very long time that I've been doing research on the energy industry. That was just a first exploration into some news I read connected to the new pipeline in Alaska, or planned to be in Alaska. And later on, well, here you can see the public situation. The intervention was meant to be there for 2 weeks maximum, but it stayed for about 8 years, just placing these decals, the logos on the bumping cars. And there you see the public transport in Mexico City. And it's totally unexpected, no, that this would last for that long. The whole area got developed. Now there is a big building in place of this fair. But yeah, it's just an example of this, let's say, early curiosity about how the oil companies were very much lobbying as part of the US government, and how that affected nature in Alaska. After some years, I also got interested in the area of the Gulf of Mexico, more exactly Yucatan in the southeast. And there is a city called Ciudad del Carmen, where all the population there is dedicated to work for Pemex, the main Mexican oil company. And what I really wanted was go there and find the chapopoteras, which is these oil springs. I wanted to see that in the natural state. But most of them were blocked with big pieces of concrete. Anyway, the whole trip in that area in Campeche was very useful because I managed to learn also about the labor issues in the area, the past of Yucatan that was also linked to another export industry earlier that was henequen, this fiber to make ropes, to make sacks. So it's very important in Mexican history. So as part of this table, you see the early result of this scouting in Campeche, classic references to ecology, but also the photographs you see there of the oil platforms. Those were taken by the workers of the oil platforms, and I found them as postcards sold in the market. I was very lucky to find that material because, of course, the oil platforms are high secured areas. You cannot approach and take these kind of photos. So it was the workers, the ones that took these. Also, when I was there was a big accident, and one of the platforms was on fire for 2 months. And those newspapers are also connected to that accident. The rest is pieces of pavement, also from Yucatan, and other objects that I consider I sacrificed in tar. And one of my main references also with this material is the Mayan culture, because they used to do that with stone sculptures. Of course, tar or asphalt is also used as a waterproofing material, but they would use it for many other things, including dental fixings. Yeah, it's a very broad use. So the elements there, some of them are symbolic. The American interests in exploring the oil deposits in Mexico. Also, well, you see over there the rope made of henequen. There is an old mobile phone. There is a Mickey Mouse. Also connections to the marine exploration needed to find this kind of oil deposits. Again, the classic references to ecology. You see, polar bears. I told you. Yeah, that's a porcelain one. And, well, this, of course, representing also the artworks that we have in this show now, that I'm super proud of the girl power behind it. Amazing team. Thanks so much. And my first reaction to these kind of paintings that are found objects was, yes, they represent a landscape, but is it real nature, what we have here? And what about this other material that is, well, let's say more natural than this landscape? And in general, I think the landscape, or analyzing what's happening to different situations in terms of the environment or the ecological crisis nowadays, I think it goes first through analyzing what's happening to very specific landscapes. So it was important to connect these kind of images to something very raw, just to trigger these questions. And well, here in its Spanish says the exercise, the aesthetic exercise as a process of disruption of the learning imaginary. And that also connects when I use a reference to corporations. It's like playing with what you already have in your mind and you go through it. I consider that the artwork is not finished until someone um, um, sees it or analyzes it. I try to be open enough for all these different interpretations. So, yeah, on the right-hand side, you see how I found oil in the beach of Campeche. Here it's one of the first examples when I played with tar and also the oil cans that you see in the exhibition and these kind of flower arrangements. Another important connection was to find out that earlier all these oil companies also were very present with products connected to, don't know, like many different household items like insecticides. This is called shell death to every pest. So at the end, it's very clear, the connection between also the historical context, because many of these companies were also at that time publishing advertisements connected to the war situation and the use of oil or gasoline to fuel tanks, or basically to fuel war. And it was not cynical, it was like really the kind of publicity they thought was positive, and they were proud about the fact of using the energy in that way. In this other image, what we see is that, well, I'm not only interested in the contemporary practice of corporations, but also what happened since colonization. And in this case, I'm using a very early illustration of the landscape, the kind of new nature that Spanish colonizers were depicting in these early illustrations that were meant to be like a photograph, like the new continent. But there we see also the distortion and how basically some elements were either out of proportion or some animals were depicted as monsters, so nothing to do with the real landscape of the new, so-called new continent. And here also it's connected to the company Monsanto, and Imagine, as it's written there, was also part of their early advertisement. So here you see that the situation is the mural painting, but it comes all the time with a fruit salad. This is the early illustration I used, and well, it's hard to see, but I took those elements from this part, and the size of the pineapple is like 5-6 times the size of the man here. So those were meant to be like a real depiction of the landscape. So whenever I present this mural painting, it always comes with this huge fruit salad. That installation happened in France, and it's to connect also other of our senses also with the piece. And most people think that this is exotic fruit that maybe I took from Mexico, but it was all bought in France. Some people had never tried a guava. So it was interesting also the social response to it. Very savage French people wanted to finish the whole fruit salad, even the big chunks. They asked for a knife to finish the really big chunks of food. impressive. Another very important consideration of landscape for me is nowadays migration. And I think it's shocking that now migration is analyzed as a crisis, contemporary crisis, when in fact is part of a natural process, and in fact also it's what triggers civilization. Not the man moving for different needs around is what made societies possible. So I'm trying to bring that concept into other projects, but of course one of the most important ones for me was crossing the border. There in the area of the Rio Grande River, crossing from the US to Mexico. And it was very interesting for me because I've never been in the border itself, the river. And also I learned that historically the border is not even, the natural border is not the river, but the deepest part of the river. And sometimes it's dry, it splits in two, it's under a canyon. So it became increasingly abstract and eventually disappears. So I felt totally liberated of this imaginary, political imaginary that is connecting the border with violence and surveillance and the wall. Of course, all of that exists, but the most powerful thing, in fact, is the environment. Experiencing the desert was very revealing, and as I say, a very liberating experience. So for this work, I already had thought about the concept of building a bridge. Maybe I thought it could be some natural elements connecting both banks of the river, but at the end, I found this area with rocks, and I painted on top of them with limestone. So you ended up with this dotted line crossing the river, and I went from north to south and then back. I only had a fanny bag with my passport in a Ziploc in case I had to enter the water a little bit. But yeah, it was totally revealing for me what the border meant. And then the installation that came out of this process collects kind of relics or souvenirs that I found in the desert, also literature connected to the Rio Grande, photographs, a map with the exact point where I crossed. There is a National Geographic magazine talking about that specific point, geographical point, and there is a photo of a man closing the border or locking the border. At that time, it says, "It's my job to lock up the United States every night and hang on to the key." And when you explain to Europeans that building the wall would mean maybe building a wall in the same scale of almost the whole Europe, is when you also realize, okay, maybe it's not possible. As I mentioned before, it's not that this violence and difficult situations don't exist, but that I realized that the most powerful thing was nature itself. And this is another very sad image of a landscape, and it's in Germany. It's a coal mine, and I had the chance to be there, and I was very much interested in a group of activists that were going to this area to live in the forest that remains near the mining industry. And it was shocking for me because we don't associate these kind of images with a country like Germany that is meant to be a developed country that doesn't have the need to exploit nature in this way. But this is happening, and I think it's the case of most of the countries around the world. And this is one of the tree houses of the activists. For me, what was really impressive was that they, living in this nature, had the sound of the machines going on all the time. And that was probably, I don't know, something close to torture, no? To be reminded of the process going on in that area. So for me, it's another example of how also landscape ends up communicating the process of the industry in the world. And this is the mural painting that resulted from my research. I was also interested in fire as an element. This mural painting was presented at the SF MoMA. And I had done some research also about fire since many years ago, trying to analyze it not as a dangerous element, but also as an element part of natural processes. For example, some seeds are not fertilized until there is a fire in the forest. And also the Native Americans had a very wise way to let some fires happen, so the small bushes would burn and nothing major would occur later. In the middle of the picture, you see a reference to the coal mining industry. So yeah, it was a moment when this research came together. The butterflies also meaning migration. But as I say, I try to avoid closing the meaning of the work. It stays open for everybody's interpretation. It's basically just going through our own personal, historical, or even political filters to analyze these kind of images. And this is a video project. I was invited to an exhibition called Climate Culture. And I knew that one of the main consequences of climate change would be the destruction of coral reefs. And from Honduras to Mexico, we have the second largest coral reef, the Mesoamerican one, apart from the Australian huge one. So I knew that this coral reef was being destroyed, and in part was caused by climate change. So I decided to go and witness, very much like I went to the Rio Bravo. I needed to see, like, what's the border, the historical or natural border. Here it was like, okay, I want to see the coral reef, so I had to get certified as a diver in 4 days, and then film in 2 days for half an hour each. And what I planned was this demonstration underwater. And I was lucky that some divers went with me, and we managed to produce the whole thing in these couple of days, taking banners down there. One said "in trouble," another one said 1%, which is basically what is left of, well, in fact, it's less than 1% of coral reef left. 4 25% of all the species living underwater. So it's really catastrophic under sea if the world keeps increasing its temperature. Here you see the other banners. The decision to make it black and white was because I was very interested in all these textures of the coral reef. At the beginning of the video, even looks like a desert. But another reason was that I also wanted to keep some distance from the touristic images that usually highlight the blue of the sea or the color of the fish. But then one fish was following us, and I really wanted to leave that bit of color as part of the final video. And this slogan represents what I think is the major statement in my work. Like, everything is common, and also the situation of species being dependent one of the other. It's a major consideration. So I would like you to experience the exhibition uphill with that statement in mind. No, it's maybe closer to a visual essay where you have a hint in one artwork, or you question one part of the mural painting, but at the end is talking about that, no, the crisis, but also the possibilities of society, and that everything is common. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the exhibition upstairs.
Oh, there we go. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to raise your hand. We can pass the mic over to you. Here we go.
Hi, congratulations on your exhibition. It's extremely interesting. I'm a
Thank
fine
you.
artist, so I'm honored to be here.
Thank you.
I just wanted a little bit more description about how the mural connects with the work and the studies that you've done in regards to the landscape and the oil, and how is the mural incorporated with
Yes.
the whole exhibition? A little bit more explanation so I can understand more, because it's just fabulous.
Yeah, thank you. The formal solution of mural paintings, I started using it in reference to historical facts, because usually, you have mural paintings when it's about the history of Mexico. No, you have many of those murals in big institutions in Mexico. So that was one key decision. No, it cannot be printed as a digital image, because then it would connect to advertising. Of course, advertising is a big influence in my work, but in that particular case, I thought, okay, it needs to be hand painted, so it connects more to this tradition of depicting historical events or situations. And I continued with that as a strategy. And then we chose to present this mural here because it does connect to the oil industry, but also it depicts a landscape. And it was important for me to connect this reference to landscape, and it's been increasingly important to use it as a departing point to ask questions, no, either about the crisis, either how we are modifying the landscape, and what's nature at the end, no, as at the end of these considerations. And when I decided about the elements, because it was first planned to be presented in Texas, where, of course, the oil industry is very big, but also in Dallas, the electronics is another major financial force. But I was wondering, well, what's this landscape? Is it the nature in Texas? Is it the nature in what used to be Mexico? Is it the nature that belonged to the Native Americans, or it's just nature? No, you go through all these historical references or connections to then decide, well, it's nature, and how we relate to these animals was also symbolic. For example, the armadillo with bulletproof vest, or the Native American basket with an armadillo inside. Everything can be symbolic, but as I said, it's very open for interpretation. But the main connection was that it started in Texas and the oil industry, no? And I'm very glad that for the first time we can see all these different solutions or elements together as an artworks, no? The mural painting, the oil cans, and also the paintings dipped in tar. Thank you.
Someone else?
Hello. I was curious about having, now that you've spent some time in San Diego, if you've maybe, for better or worse, found inspiration for another project or some other topic that you would like to explore, especially, being someone that can come into the community with some fresh eyes, and if you've picked up anything, like I said, that you would like to explore further in a future work.
I would love to. I'm all the time trying to find the connections, not only with the place, but also with the people, because at the end, what I consider research is not only going through documentation or even the internet or visiting the place. It's very much talking to the people that lives the place, and then I maybe use them as the filter of my information, no? Because I trust them. But I haven't spent that much time here. I only came to install the show, and then the residency is starting, so I'll be also present in the exhibition space to talk about the show, and then I'll have time to explore a little bit more. But as a starting point, I love this location. I'm surprised by the weather, so it's a couple of things that already are making me think, like, for example, the usual, how you say it, the preconception about the Californian sunset and warm weather is like, okay, it's not always warm. No? So that was one first thing I've noticed as a difference. So yeah, I'm super interested, and I'm especially willing to meet people and learn through them. Thank
Someone
you.
else?
Thank you for your show. Everything has been amazing to see. Sorry, my name's Marco.
There's someone here. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Fine.
Okay.
In seeing all your work and seeing the way you address the the black and white, the reasoning for the black and white art underwater in relation to tourism. Your art reminds me of Howard Zinn's work as far as the history of the United States. Do you find it hard to sometimes find the right lens in these different areas where tourism might be a very large industry?
Well, not only in those areas, but in general, as my work responds very much to different contexts and different cultural, economic, political contexts that I'm not familiar with, it's also a responsibility. And that connects to what I mentioned before, that I have to trust people to somehow educate me or through a certain intuition see what can make sense or generate new questions in that context. And in the case of the tourism industry, I think it's also talking to the local population and see what are they interested in. Like, for example, I filmed this video in Akumal, so I got to meet the people that is protecting the turtles in that ecosystem. So it's also through them that I know how it would impact not only the environment, the underwater water world, but also the people living in that area. And the other thing I've learned is that most species are interconnected. No, some mussels can depend on fish to reproduce, and mussels are in charge of cleaning the water around. So everything is dependent of the other species. And at some point, I produced also a work with insects and a lot of early scientific microscopes, and that was connected to talking about the impossibility of the individual, talking about the society and how we are all a collective formation of cells, or don't know, the universe is another collection of planets, etc. No? So it's impossible to find an individual species that can survive by itself. So for me, that reinforces the idea of community, and again, to the fact that everything is common, no, as a resource. It's not our resources, but yeah, everything is connected. But yeah, I would say that for the tourism industry is very much the same how I analyze other contexts. Thank you. There was a question over here. Thank you.
Hi. You do a lot of different types of art, and my question is, have you always done murals, and how do you see murals, the role that murals play in your entire oeuvre, your work? You know, is that a real important part of what you do, or just a not so important? How do you view murals?
Yeah, it became increasingly important. First of all, as this connection to a historical depiction, but my early interest was also public art, graffiti art, and interventions in public space, of course, advertisement. But then recently I was analyzing how the Mexican muralists also somehow represented a very specific political reaffirmation, no, of historical facts, and how they were inserted into the institutional life. near my studio space, I admire very much a market that has Noguchi relief mural and also a collection of mural paintings, mainly painted by the students of the main muralists Orozco and what I really like about this market is that people is living with them. You know, you have the stall for fruits or juices. Next to it, there is a cultural center on top. It's kind of hidden to find the Noguchi mural, but then that reinforces my idea of why I produce art, and it's very much to make it public, and that for me is the best environment to present it. So more than the let's say the formal solution of the mural is the mural as a public strategy. Oh, there is a frog thing. And when I mention strategy is, for example, I know that sometimes a mural painting would be seen, for example, the Sao Paulo Biennial by 1 million visitors, and I value that more than doing something as an intervention in the public space that maybe gets lost. So for me, it's always this analysis of what's the best for not only the social context, but also the exhibition space. No, so that's why also in this case we thought a mural could go very well with the works presented with the cans, and the other very nice thing is to invite other people to work on it, to paint it. It has been very different. Sometimes it's art students, sometimes it's sign painters. Who else has painted it? A very broad range of people, a graffiti artist in Sao Paulo. So in Dallas, maybe there is an image around the internet of the Dallas Museum of Art presenting this mural for the first time. And it was a very public process because this area was connecting two sections of the museum. It was a hallway, so they were all the time seeing the process, and that was very enjoyable, no? That the people got to see also the process. And that will happen a little bit here, no? Because we are still finishing it. So I think that's enjoyable. But yeah, I would say that it was this early consideration of the mural paintings as a historical connection. I love, for example, the super early paintings in Italy, in Siena. There is one that is called Allegory of Good and Evil. And it's like, I identify so much with that, but it's a mural painting from 1400s. And it's like, okay, this is really early example, and for me it's like I could have ended up in the same kind of equation, no? The landscape of destruction of the rural area and the city, and something super positive in the same kind of landscape, no? And I mean, I learned later about these two murals, but they just fascinate me. Thank you for your question.
Hi. First, I want to thank you so much for being here. My friend Claudia and I are here from Tijuana. So, and I've been a fan of your work since 2012 when I first started to be an artist, and I really, really love your work, and you've really inspired me a lot as a woman artist as well. Thank you. I do a lot of my work on the border, and I really appreciated your piece that you did in the Rio Bravo where you painted the rocks. And one of the things I struggle with my work is trying to get away from this very dark political imaginary that we have of the border, that the border is the border wall, and the border is militarized, which just sort of renaturalizes it. And then, but then I've done like portfolio reviews, and people say, well, how do they know it's the border if you don't have the border wall in the image? And I'm like, well, how do you get away from that? You know, how do you deal with that? So I'm just wondering if you're interested, if you think you might come and do more work on the border, or kind of do more with the landscape here.
I am working right now on a Yellow Pages book that is for migrants, and that process started like 3 years ago between the city of El Paso and Juarez. I imagined I was going to be able to go to the desert and film animals migrating, but then the pandemic happened, and everything had to be researched remotely with people that knew about the border in that area of the Chihuahuan desert, but the border in connection to the ecosystem, other people that were also part of the organization of shelters. So a lot of information about the connection between both cities. But at the end, I ended up, same. I ended up realizing that the network of people that is already generating projects to help migrants, or to just connect to a positive reaction in this very difficult situation. It's already integrating these activities in their life in a very natural way. For example, one project in Juarez is a bakery that also produces graphic material. Mainly it's engraving. They also do graffiti work and a lot of artistic projects. They don't have money to pay their rent, but they do donate bread for the shelters continuously. So it's like, okay, that's a great thing. Another one was a free shop that is a huge space, probably 2 times the gallery space, that is full of free stuff for the people of Juarez. And mainly it's migrants that manage to get there and get free clothes or even toys. Children can only take 1 toy at a time because, of course, it's tempting. Again, no, a great project, and they know each other, and it's not that these autonomous projects are separated from the main institutions that deal with the legal situations of migrants, but they know each other, they are friends, they are a network that exists there. And then it's when I realized, okay, maybe directory, a Yellow Pages book for the migrants to know that these things exist and that they are safe places for them, it's a good element to have around, and it will be a book for migrants. So it's like, okay, again, no, it's this, what's the strategy, what is the element that can connect what I found, but it was through meeting people remotely and learning about all these projects that, I came up with that idea. And at the end, we have contributions of many artists and also literature, because I thought, okay, it's not that the migrants are only people in need. No, they also should enjoy this as a nice book to have around. So that's why there is a big part of graphic material and poems, literature, stories, and the direction is also this statement of migration is natural, no? Also focusing on, well, the difficulty of many animals would face with the wall, because human migration will happen and continues happening in many different ways, but the wall itself, it's basically a danger for species and like animal species and an ecological destruction in that area. Not all the explosives they need to use to build the wall. I learned that even well, in other circumstances, if it's a real wall, not a kind of gate, bees, for example, cannot fly too high, no? So they cannot pollinize the flowers, and of course the big animals also are in big risk. But yeah, it's a learning process, no? All these little things are very interesting. Another thing I learned when I did this crossing in the Chihuahuan Desert was that there used to be these communitarian bridges connecting communities from the US and Mexico. That's very common in the border. I didn't know that. But then they were destroyed after September 11. And those areas that were previously connected like that, they became trafficking points because they stopped the community, you know? And again, for me, it reinforces the idea of community is the way to go, not to be one with the other. But yeah, thank you very much. I hope I can see your work as well. We can
Thank you.
meet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minerva. I think the temperature dropped about 10 degrees during that talk. So you may all want to get a little bit warm and go up the top of the hill, maybe grab a drink to help you out along the way. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful evening. There are also a few things for sale. If you can see over in the back, we have some t-shirts. There, is that Katrina back there? Yes, Katrina waving at you. There are some t-shirts, some tote bags, and books as well if you're interested in purchasing something. Thank you so much.